It was one of the biggest revolutions in Europe in the 21st century, a revolution that portrayed pro-European trajectory and led to a bloody conflict with Russia which is unresolved until now. In this video of the Info Perspective, we will take a look at Ukraine's Euromaidan Revolution and its aftermath. Euromaidan, also known as the Revolution of Dignity, was a mass protest movement which started when the then Ukraine President Viktor Yanukovych refused to sign the long-anticipated agreement on Ukraine's associate membership in the European Union. The protest started from 21st November 2013 and ended on 22nd February 2014, with the eventual ousting of Yanukovych and his pro-Russian government. Viktor Yanukovych was Ukraine's fourth president from 25th February 2010 to 22nd February 2014. Viktor Yanukovych was born in Donetsk Oblast, which is a province in eastern Ukraine, on 9 July 1950. He graduated with a degree in mechanical engineering from Donetsk Polytechnic Institute in 1980. Yanukovych previously served as the governor of Donetsk Oblast from 1997 to 2002. He then served as Ukraine's prime minister from 2002 to 2004 and 2006 to 2007 under two different presidents. When he was the prime minister of Ukraine, Yanukovych did share his desire to maintain closer ties with Russia. When he became president, Yanukovych demonstrated his pro-Russian leanings again. There were many Ukrainian-Russian bilateral agreements during his administration. One such deal was the extension of Russia's lease of the port at Sevastopol in Crimea until 2042, in exchange for a reduction in the price of Russia's natural gas. In 2012, negotiations began between Ukraine and the EU on a treaty that would lower trade barriers with the EU, launch reforms to bring Ukrainian political institutions closer to European standards, and begin a process that could lead to eventual European Union membership. This treaty is known as the European Union Association Agreement. On 21st November 2013, Viktor Yanukovych announced that he would suspend talks on the association agreement. The suspension was widely seen as a rejection to not only to closer EU ties, but also to political reform to combat the widespread corruption that had plagued Ukraine. On the very same day, 1,500 people gathered at Ukraine's main Independence Square to protest the decision. Instead of signing the EU Association Agreement, Yanukovych accepted a multi-billion-dollar bailout package from Russia, which many saw as a sign that he had chosen to side with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. On 30th November 2013, the protest became a huge national movement where several hundred activists, mostly students who had continued to remain on the square, were brutally suppressed by the police. Images of police brutality went viral on social media, angering people across the country. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians from all regions of Ukraine gathered at the Independence Square to protest against Yanukovych and demanded his resignation. On 16 January 2014, Yanukovych introduced a series of repressive laws severely restricting civil society and the right to protest. The laws provoked another surge in protest activity, and riot police began to violently crack down on demonstrators. On 18 February 2014, riot police stormed the protest camp, setting fire to tents and shooting at demonstrators with rubber bullets. Violence swiftly escalated on 20 February 2014, where riot police started using live ammunition on the protesters. Since the start of the protest on 21st November 2013, more than 100 people were killed and 2,500 injured. On 22nd February 2014, Yanukovych fled Ukraine and landed in Russia while Ukraine's parliament voted to oust him and hold new elections. On 25th May 2014, Petro Poroshenko was elected as Ukraine's new president. Crimea, officially part of Ukraine, lies on a peninsula stretching out from the south of Ukraine between the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Crimea was annexed by the Russian Empire during the reign of Catherine the Great in 1783 and remained part of Russia until 1954, when it was transferred to Ukraine under the then Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev. After the collapse of the Soviet Union and Ukraine gained its independence in 1991, it kept Crimea as part of its territory. The government in Kiev inherited an arsenal of an estimated 5,000 nuclear weapons, more than 170 intercontinental ballistic missiles, and several dozen nuclear bombers. Ukraine thus had the world's third largest nuclear weapons stockpile. On 5 December 1994, an agreement known as the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances was signed by Ukraine with the US, UK, and Russia. Under this agreement, Ukraine gave up its nuclear arsenal in exchange for a guarantee that Russia would respect the independence and sovereignty and the existing borders of Ukraine. However, the agreement was violated with the annexation of Crimea by Russia. After Euromaidan, where President Yanukovych was ousted, Little Green Men, a term coined by Ukrainians, began seizing key facilities on the Crimean Peninsula on 27 February 2014. The Little Green Men were clearly professional soldiers by their bearing, carried Russian weapons and wore Russian combat fatigues, but they had no identifying insignia. They seized the Crimean parliament and raised the Russian flag. On the next day, they took control of 2 airports in Crimea. Vladimir Putin originally denied that they were Russian soldiers. However, on 17 April 2014, Putin for the first time publicly acknowledged that it was a special operation executed by pro-Russian separatists and Russian military personnel. On 16 March 2014, Crimea, which was now under Russian control, held a referendum. It was reported that 97% allegedly voted to join Russia, with a turnout of 83%. However, the referendum was not recognized internationally, as no international observers were allowed to observe the referendum process. On 18 March 2014, Crimean and Russian officials signed a Treaty of Accession, and the reunification of Crimea with the Russian Federation was proclaimed. Since Crimea's annexation, Russia had poured in billions of dollars in investments in Crimea. A new airport was constructed in Simferopol, and a 1.4-mile suspension bridge was built to connect Crimea to the Russian mainland. Despite Russia's efforts to boost Crimea's economy, there had been downsides as well. The changeover from the Ukrainian hryvnia to the Russian ruble had sent prices skyrocketing for Crimean locals. Shops had replaced cheap Ukrainian goods with expensive Russian-made ones. At the same time, Western sanctions imposed on Russia for the annexation had slashed the number of foreign tourists in Crimea, stunning what was a growing sector and major source of income before 2014. Besides Crimea's annexation, eastern Ukraine saw civil unrest after the Euromaidan movement. Since March 2014, demonstrations by pro-Russian and anti-government groups took place in the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts of Ukraine, together commonly known as the Donbas region. In April 2014, pro-Russian separatists had taken control of the government buildings in many cities within Donbas. The separatists then declared the controlled areas as the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. The Ukraine government then launched a military counter-offensive to retake the separatist controlled areas. In August 2014, Russian aid, in the form of Russian military personnel, were transported into the separatist controlled areas of DPR and LPR to support the separatists against the Ukrainian military. Western countries had described this maneuver as a stealth invasion of Ukraine by Russia. 2 ceasefire agreements, known as the Minsk Agreements, were signed on September 2014 and February 2015 respectively. Besides ceasefire from both sides, the Minsk Agreements outlined other details to resolve the conflict. It outlined that both sides should withdraw troops and military equipment. For Ukraine, it should pardon the participants of the conflict, carry out local elections, and recognize a de facto autonomy of the region DPR and LPR in the constitution. For Russia, it should return its equipment and mercenaries to Russia, ensure the local military formations lay down arms, and give Ukraine control over its border with Russia. So far, there is little progress on both sides in fulfilling the Minsk Agreement. Moreover, the ceasefire was violated almost every day by both sides, and the conflict still remains unresolved until today. Since the Donbas conflict began, more than 13,000 people were killed and 40,000 wounded. It was also estimated that 1.5 million people were also displaced due to the war. As mentioned previously, President Petro Poroshenko was elected on 25 May 2014 as the new president of Ukraine after the Euromaidan Revolution. Petro Poroshenko was born in 26 September 1965. He served as the Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2009 to 2010 and as the Minister of Trade and Economic Development in 2012. Besides being a politician, Poroshenko was also a well-known businessman, most notably as the founder of Roshan, a confectionery manufacturer that achieved prominence in the chocolate and candy market in Eastern Europe. Poroshenko was previously a billionaire, but as of 2019, Poroshenko had a net worth of $705 million. This decline was due to Ukraine's economic turmoil with Russia. His other assets include a bank, a television channel, an insurance company, and several agriculture and food enterprises. On the 25th May 2014 election, Petro Poroshenko won the elections with 54.7% of the votes, when excluding the Donetsk and Luhansk oblasts that have 6.6 million residents. His closest competitor was Yulia Tymoshenko, who emerged with 12.81% of the votes. While campaigning for president, Poroshenko promised to shell Roshan. Instead, he transferred his stake to a blind trust in January 2016. Under his presidency, Ukraine underwent some reforms that had significant success. One of the successful reforms was the strengthening of Ukraine's military. In the days of then-President Viktor Yanukovych, there were only 5,000 combat-ready troops available to defend Ukraine when Russia occupied Crimea. Moreover, there was no modern individual equipment for soldiers, no adequate system of nutrition, no construction of new study centers and military accommodation. There was also no professional training where soldiers were taught to shoot. Today, the Ukraine Army ranks 27 out of 136 countries in the global firepower rating. Particularly strong is its land army, belonging to the top 10 worldwide by power and number of artillery and armored vehicles. Air power also had improved during the last 5 years from 158 to 260 items of aircraft. The Ukraine army was rapidly moving towards NATO standards. Decentralization was also another successful reform under President Poroshenko. More than 3,000 amenities such as schools and hospitals were built with the support of the state budget in 2014 to 2018. Many items were built by communities themselves. This was more than during the previous 23 years of Ukrainian governments put together. These rapid changes were possible due to the growth of local budgets from $68 billion in 2014 to $234 billion in 2018 as a result of reform. In addition, infrastructural road reconstruction programs were implemented. Altogether, 6,500 kilometers of roads underwent complete reconstruction from 2016 to 2018. Another highly visible reform was the establishment of a new patrol police force. In July 2015, Ukraine launched a new patrol police force in the country's capital, Kyiv. The process was then repeated with the establishment of new patrol police departments in regional capitals across Ukraine. The new patrol police force was better equipped and had better wages so as to combat corruption, which plagued the old patrol police force. Despite some success in reforms, Poroshenko was unable to push through with judicial reforms and combat corruption among elites. These were the main reasons why Poroshenko lost the 2019 election to current President Volodymyr Zelensky. So this is the end of my video on Ukraine's Euromaidan Revolution and its aftermath. If you like my video, please give a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to my channel. Also, please feel free to put your opinions in the comment section below on what other videos you'd like to see in this channel. Thank you for watching and see you soon.